then we'll go hot with the one, the only Jay Beddict, the grand man of mystery, who is at Foundry, is our VP of research there, doing some super interesting stuff. Jay, amazing to connect with you.
Rob, thanks for having me. And sorry it took me so long to connect my devices.
I think it's a feature, not a bug. You know, for somebody who is constantly teaching us about the importance of privacy and maintaining your privacy and anonymity, I think this is a feature, not a bug. You know, nothing comes without a learning curve. But we're here to talk mining in the lead up to Thames 25, which is less than 2 weeks from now at this point, and you're going to be there, which we're super excited about. So I'd love for you to kind of maybe jump in and tell us first who you are.
Yeah.
And second off, how that ties into what we're potentially going to see in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. So I'm Jay Beddict, as you said, VP of research here at Foundry. I've been with Foundry nearly 5 years now, which is kind of an insane thing to say. Helped the team grow from, I think 10 employees when I joined to now we're, closer to 200. We've got tons of lines of business, doing a lot of vertically integrated, mining work. We've had a lot of changes, but now we're happy and proud to say we are a vertically integrated Bitcoin mining software company. And so my role there is mostly looking at the lower level protocol stuff and helping make sure that the tools that our engineering teams build interact with Bitcoin in a way that is efficient for our customers, productive for them, adds value to the stack that we offer, and then of course doesn't fuck up Bitcoin.
That's right.
Most importantly, so it's a fun job, and it really does help. I think to have folks like yourselves and Bitcoin Park who put on events like Thames and of course the OG NEMS in Nashville. To really bring together a lot of the best and brightest in the mining space. I mean, as I said, I've been this pseudonym has been in the mining space for 5 years. Other entities have been involved for a little longer, but in terms of public-facing mining content, I think we're only seeing it get better and better. I remember when I first joined, there was Mining Disrupt, and shout out to those guys who've been putting on a great program for many years. But NEMS and Thames, I think, is a little bit more focused in the sense that it's less of a trade show and more of a what is happening, where are we going kind of discussions. And I think that's really important because I think mining for many years has been kind of maligned. It's sort of the least thought of component of Bitcoin. We've had a lot of amazing folks building really great stuff on custody side, wallet, innovating on the protocol side, the entirety of Lightning, all sorts of fun stuff. And I think we are definitely starting to see a bigger focus on the mining element. And I think what you guys are doing is really helpful to drawing attention to that, and also putting a lot of the right folks in the right place to just have some of those conversations, and more importantly, share it out with the rest of the world. I think mining has been historically been very secretive, or just again, we're in our own little
by
niche.
Its nature. That's
exactly.
Right.
We're a niche of niche of a niche. So it's good to get I say this as a privacy advocate, but it's good to get some exposure to talk about it, because it's really important, because it does impact the rest of the Bitcoin stack. And
that's right. And I think Jay, there's one interesting thing that you brought up, is that you're working at this very low level, at the protocol level when it comes to mining. And the one thing I've noticed is that people seem to barely grasp mining from the high level kind of conceptual point of view. And getting them to even understand the hashing algorithm that we use is a lift in and of itself. But the rabbit hole just goes so deep. So even this idea of the nonce, I was recently researching this. The idea of the nonce is so much more complicated than it seems on the surface. You say the nonce, well, you just increment a nonce. It's a number that I put into a block header. Well, that's not really the case, because it's only 4 bytes, and that's only 4.7 billion guesses. And then once you run out of those guesses, you have to increment something else. But when a machine is 300 terahashes or 300 trillion guesses, that's how many nanoseconds to get through the nonce field. Then you have to start incrementing somewhere else. So the nonce is really a term that refers to something that would be in the data that you are that you're hashing, but it's so much more. So that it's a specific point.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, do you have ideas about how we can better articulate what we're doing, because it gets so disgustingly technical so quickly?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, certainly the nonce example is that is a deeply technical and fun problem.
That's
I
right.
think it's hard to articulate this because, again, as I said, it's a niche of a niche of a niche. And, Bitcoin is such a broad topic, and there's so many rabbit holes to go down. And I think this is, of course, one of many. But in terms of like educating on the mining side, I do think the best way to do it is to actually do it. Maybe it's just because that's how I learn. And I think it's easier than ever now to like start mining. I love what Scott and team are doing. Well, the whole community around BitAxe, not just Scott, but shout out to Scott. I think something like that is a great tool to get people's hands dirty, because you'll learn, I'm going to plug it in, I'm going to make so much money. No, that's not how mining economics work. You will lose money and you will enjoy it.
That's right.
But it's great because it's open source, you can really start to tinker with it. But as you said, how do we educate more people? Because the kind of folks who are going to, run that, build that, play with it, like that's, it's not a small number of people, but it's not a material number in the sense that like Bitcoin touches so many people now. And I think the education on the mining side, it's kind of incumbent on folks like Foundry and others to sort of really be transparent in the process, what is happening. And that's one thing that my time at Foundry that we've made sure we've done. We have our FPPS calculation out there, and the FPPS rabbit hole is deep and dark,
very
and
deep,
terrifying. If you can look at my Twitter, you can, or my X, and my Noster, like it's just, I'm often maligning FPPS. It is the best we have right now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to imply that it's going anywhere. I think, again, it's a market demand. Customers want smooth, consistent, stable payouts. That's how you run a business. But there's some deep issues there, and there's great folks like Ocean and Demand Pool who are pushing the envelope on new approaches to that. And I think that's another part of the education is they're talking about these things very openly, which they should. Foundry's a little bit more quiet, in that front. And I think it's, one of the other tasks my job is to go to conferences, talk about stuff. So part of it is just sharing out what goes on in this niche. Where are the problems? What are the solutions? Right? Because I know, people might say like, oh, Ocean and Demand are like, they're very direct in their commentary. But I think it's necessary, right? Like there's an established concepts around FPPS, and I think the way that they're I take some issue with certain things, but that's just because I'm so deep in the weeds, right? Broad strokes, it's great to see that kind of innovation, and I think getting back to the point of like how do we educate, folks who are doing the innovation are now so much more vocal than they were in the past, right?
Yeah.
The original Stratum implementation, almost 10 years now. That just sort of came about. People said, "Oh, sure, whatever," and we just kind of threw it in, and that's how pools worked, and no one really understood it. But
yeah.
now
Can you go a little deeper on that for folks who might not be as technical or understand what we mean when we say Stratum?
Yeah. So Stratum is the protocol that sits between ASIC miners, or really any hash producing device, and the pool. So it's a way for pools to distribute work, which is to say distribute templates down to the miners, and for those miners to then interpret that data, begin hashing, and then send the results back, the shares, proving that they were working, on the correct job or template. And so that's like critical functionality to, frankly, how Bitcoin works at this point, right? Pools are not part of the original Bitcoin paper. They are sort of an afterthought. And again, pools originated because people wanted smooth, consistent payouts, right? So they started with payout structures like PPLNS that was very much the customer, the miner, is exposed to the variance of finding blocks. Then you had things like PPS, where you get stable payouts from the subsidy but no exposure to fees. PPS Plus gives you stable payouts on subsidy and the variable exposure on fees. And then what we have today is FPPS that gives you very stable payouts based on your theoretical earnings for both subsidy and fees. But that's Stratum.
So Stratum
protocol.
is kind of this, it's this communication rails, basically, that allows you to speak between what's this often maligned but necessary, because what people forget is that the original slush post on the Bitcoin Talk forum was the announcement of Slush Pool, Merrick, and in that post, they brought up a really important issue, which was that all of the CPU miners were getting their lunches eaten by the GPU miners. So it was actually at the time a very valid way, and it still is a very valid way, to pool risk and to reduce your variance and actually get you some reward for the work that you do.
Yes, and that's the core function of a pool. It is essentially an insurance business in which you are managing risk for the miners. And so, there is centralization risk with that, absolutely. And we need to be upfront and real with that. We see it if you look at projects like Stratum.work. You can see there's definitely some funkiness that goes on these days, but it exists not because it's evil and someone's trying to control Bitcoin. It exists because of financial incentives. Like, that's how this whole thing works.
That's right.
And I think, a lot of large mining operations today, and this is the first appearance publicly as the pseudonym was at Mining Disrupt in 2021. Cool. And I said then, and I continue to say, that FPPS is addicting. It is sugar, or whatever other bad substance you want to take, and it's hard to stop because, again, and I'm not trying to hate on anyone who uses it. We offer it, right? I have hash rate on FPPS pools. It's hard to stop though, because the financial incentive to use it is high, because it provides stable, predictable income for your business. You can go to your investors if you're really large, and you can demonstrate that revenue. You predict. Those are important functions for operating a business at scale. Having said that, and one of the great joys of my job is we get to look at new ways to do that, and that's about as far as I'll tease on that. But there are innovations in pool payouts that are coming that can offer that. Some stability with less centralization risk, with less variance risk for the pools, because the other side of this equation is the reason pools are so centralized is you need a lot of capital to offer FPPS. Obviously Foundry has that because of our parent company. Antpool has the capital because they've been in the game, forever. And it's hard for incumbents, it's hard for new pools to enter, because the incumbents have this huge moat.
Can you help me understand? Because the general thrust we're getting at is that when I go from a PPLNS payout, which is where we're all experiencing the variance, right? We're all having to wait for that next block to be hit. You have this FPPS emergence, which transfers that variance from the person who's hashing to the pool. And so we understand that means that the pool now is always on the hook to pay that bill every single day, but they are still waiting sort of the accounts receivable to come in, right? They have to hit the blocks.
And wait 100 blocks.
How much risk is that? How much money are we talking about? Are we talking about $10 million? Are we talking about $100 million?
I don't know what dollars are, but I can tell you it's hundreds of Bitcoin that has to sit in reserve for pools of our size. Yeah,
and that's a great question. Is how do you even account for that? Because I assume you're having to switch between the inbound, which is the Bitcoin, and then the way it's denominated, and often folks are using hash price as USD denominated instead of Bitcoin denominated.
Yeah. So when we think about modeling FPPS risk, and this is the lion's share of where my free time has been in the last couple months, is we think about it in Bitcoin terms, first of all, right? Because we're trying to manage variance on finding blocks. And the result is you get Bitcoin or you don't get Bitcoin. And then you have this obligation on the other side, right? So operating an FPPS pool, you incur very large liabilities that are long-lived in the sense of they take 100 blocks to settle out. And so you have to maintain a capital buffer, Bitcoin buffer or reserve that will weather you through those 100-block lockups, the blocks you do find, and has enough headroom that if you're really unlucky, you can still make those payouts. Because, and we saw this with F2 pool. No, who was it? Poolin. I'm so sorry. Shout out. I mean, I love all the pools. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to hate on anybody, but we saw it with Poolin who missed payouts and their hash rate has never recovered. So it's really important when you're offering FPPS to have that backstop. And like I said, for a pool of our size, it's to the tune of several hundred Bitcoin. And that's I'm not one of those folks seeking yield, but it just sits idle. That's capital that can't be deployed to other projects. But it bolsters and prevents, any variation from any exposure to variance to the pool customers. And that's
a risk buffer.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's our job.
And you have to be conservative because the second, as you say, the second Foundry doesn't pay out a pool reward, it's game over. Yeah.
And I think it's there's so many factors that go into why this is how it is. And I think it's important to remember that customers want this, right? And the pools have to offer, in order for pools to exist, they need to offer what customers want. And I love to see things like Datum and Stratum v2 with Ocean on demand coming out and providing other options, because then you start to have these conversations, because from a pool perspective, FPPS is a rough business. I'll be very honest, right? It's not particularly enjoyable to have to wake up every day and look at your reserves versus your blocks found versus what was expected versus your payout calculations. That's a very complicated business. And seeing these new innovations coming out, I think is great. Foundry has openly and consistently supported Stratum v2. We've donated development time as well as actual Bitcoin to that project. Datum came out of Ocean, sort of separately. But love what they're doing there. To see that, because I think there's room for different payout methodologies. FPPS, if you're a publicly traded company, that makes sense. You cannot get on a call with investors and analysts and say, oops, our luck was bad this quarter. They're going to say, what are you talking about? What do you mean luck? You're running a business, dude. Right? But if you're smaller or if you're private, you can get some of that exposure and you'll be fine. And on the measure, over time, you may actually end up earning more because you're getting more transaction fee variance exposure, and the pool fees can be a little bit lower because they're not having to buffer this massive risk. Mm-hmm.
Jay, we're in our last couple of minutes. It's always a pleasure to talk to you because of your technical depth and then your ability to bring things up to the surface. I know we're running short on our time. Are there any final thoughts or things that you're excited for the next couple of weeks to bring to us in Austin?
Yeah, I'm stoked for barbecue. Always good. But no, I'm really excited to hear from some folks who are presenting at Thames, and then you guys are co-headlining with Bitcoin Plus right after, and I think and that's a mining focused one as well. So I think Austin is going to be an absolute blast that week. I think there's going to be a lot of cool conversations had, things like hash pools and other stuff. So, but yeah, that's what I'm most excited for. So, but I do have to run, so I will catch you later, Rob. Thank you so much.
Well, for your huge time. Pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
All right, speak soon. Bye.
See ya.